Here's $5. I just need a dad for one day, whispered the little alien girl. The glass walks of Thalassa Crown stretched like ribs over a dark ocean. Beneath the transparent floor, the water glowed with shifting blue light from the bioluminescent farms below. The air was cold, damp, and clean, the kind of sterile chill that came from filtered vents and desalinated mist. It was evening shift change. Workers moved quietly, heads down, their uniforms streaked with condensation from the fog machines. Jonas Rook stood outside the Blue Vault Clinic, waiting for his shift report to upload. The screen on his wrist console blinked green. Hydroculture data complete. He rubbed his eyes, tired. Every evening was the same. Hours spent calibrating water systems and monitoring nutrient ratios in the lower algae gardens. He had been a field medic once in the Maritime Infantry, before Thalassa Crown became his self-imposed exile. He wasn't running from a crime or disgrace, just exhaustion. Too many bodies, too many losses. The city was quiet, efficient, and impersonal, exactly what he needed. No blood, no panic, just maintenance and routine. Until tonight, a tug on his sleeve broke his focus. He turned. A little alien girl stood beside him, barefoot, blue-skinned, long white hair clinging to her wet cheeks. She couldn't have been older than 7 or 8. She held up a crumpled 5-credit note, the kind that barely held its shape anymore. "Please," she said softly, "I just need a dad for one day." Jonas blinked, unsure he'd heard right. "What? If a dad signs the paper, they'll let us take my mom home. They said only a family member can sign. I just need you to sign." Her voice trembled halfway through the sentence, but her eyes didn't. They were steady, too steady for her age. The kind of steadiness that came from desperation, not courage. Jonas crouched to her level. Her skin had a faint shimmer, and her hand shook as she held out the note. "What's your name?" "Neve." "Where's your mom, Neve?" "In our room. She's sick. They said she can't come home without medicine. But I had 5 credits. I gave them the money, but they said I need a parent's sign." Jonas exhaled slowly, trying to make sense of the situation. The clinic behind them was closed for the night, just a row of vending kiosks and empty chairs. He could have walked away. It wasn't his problem. But something in the girl's tone, the absolute certainty that he could fix it, hit him harder than it should have. He looked down at her wet hair, her oversized sweater hanging past her hands. "All right," he said finally. "Show me where she is." They walked through the Blue Vault, one of the lower residential rings. It was humid, almost tropical from the desalination towers nearby. The faint smell of brine and algae hung in the air. Pipes dripped steadily from overhead. The sound of turbines throbbed through the metal floor panels. Neve moved fast despite her size, weaving between narrow corridors lined with small capsule doors. Jonas followed, keeping a step behind. He noticed how often she glanced back, not to see if he followed, but to make sure he didn't disappear. Her voice came suddenly. "You were a medic, weren't you?" Jonas hesitated. "Used to be. How'd you know?" "You walk like one. Slow but ready." He almost smiled. "That's one way to put it." She stopped at a narrow door marked with peeling paint. Unit 3B, 47. She pressed a palm to the sensor. It flickered green, and the door slid open with a soft hydraulic hiss. The air inside was heavy and warm, thick with the smell of salt, wet fabric, and stale air. A single dim lamp glowed in the corner. The room was barely large enough for a bedroll, a folding chair, and a food heater. On the tide mat lay Illyra, Neve's mother. Her blue skin looked pale, drained of color. She was sweating, breathing shallow and fast. Her long white hair was tangled around her neck, sticking to her damp skin. A thin microfiber shawl clung to her shoulders, soaked through. She wore a tied-wrap skirt knotted high on one hip, practical for the humidity, but revealing more than comfort allowed. Her body trembled as she tried to sit up, then gave up halfway. Jonas dropped his bag beside her and knelt. "How long has she been like this?" 3 days, Neve said. "She can't breathe when she lies down." Jonas placed 2 fingers against Illyra's neck. Her pulse was fast, uneven. Her chest rattled faintly when she exhaled. He recognized the sound instantly. Salt veil pneumonia, a respiratory infection common in the lower domes. Harmless if treated early, deadly if ignored. He looked around. The air filter in the corner was covered in dust. The humidifier's light blinked red, empty. "Did the clinic give you anything?" he asked. "They said to come back with a parent," Neve whispered. Jonas clenched his jaw. He didn't say what he thought of that. He opened his old field kit, one he hadn't used in years. The sterile pouches were yellowed, but intact. He started assembling a small nebulizer using what he could find: a broken aroma diffuser, a ceramic cup, and some tubing from the room's water line. Neve watched wide-eyed. "Can you fix her?" "We'll try." He filled the cup with clean water, added a small dose of azraphilin from a vial in his kit, a kelp-based antifungal, and set the heater coil under it. Steam began to rise. The smell was sharp, saline. He lifted Illyra gently, propping her against folded blankets. She groaned, eyes fluttering open for the first time. Her gaze met his, unfocused at first, then wary. "Who are you?" Her voice was rough, the sound of dry lungs, scraping for air. "Jonas," he said. "I'm here to help." "I didn't ask." She stopped to cough, turning her head aside. He steadied her with one hand behind her shoulders. "Save your breath." Literally. Her lips parted as if to protest again, then closed. Her head leaned against his arm, too tired to argue. He guided the tubing near her mouth. "Breathe slow. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Like this." Neve knelt beside him, holding her mother's hand. "You can do it, Mom." The room filled with the hiss of steam. Illyra's breathing steadied, slow but stronger. Her shoulders relaxed as the medicine worked. Jonas checked her pulse again, still fast but not erratic. Minutes passed. The only sound was the steady rhythm of breathing. Then, the door opened abruptly. A uniformed building attendant stepped in, startled by the scene. A human kneeling beside an alien woman, tubing, steam, and a faint smell of chemicals. "What's going on here?" the man demanded. Jonas didn't rise. "Treatment. Salt veil infection." The attendant frowned. "You can't perform medical procedures here. It's unauthorized." "Listen," Jonas said, motioning toward Illyra's chest. "A few hours ago, she was suffocating. Now her lungs are clearing. You can hear the difference." The man hesitated, leaning closer. The rattling in her breath was faint now, nearly gone. He straightened, uncertain. "All right, I'll bring towels." When the door closed, Jonas exhaled. Neve's eyes darted between them. "Are we in trouble?" "No," Jonas said. "We're fine." He checked Illyra's forehead. The fever had started to ease. She was sweating, but the tremors in her muscles were fading. Her eyelids fluttered open again. "You could have walked away." Jonas looked at her, really looked. "Yeah," he said, "but you'd be dead by morning." Something shifted in her face then, not gratitude exactly, but recognition. Like she understood he wasn't here to play hero. He just couldn't look away. He handed Neve a task. "Keep counting her breaths. When you reach 100, tell me." Neve nodded, whispering numbers under her breath. Jonas leaned back against the wall, tired but alert. His mind was already calculating next steps: hydration, rest, light meals, one more dose in 6 hours. He hadn't treated anyone in years, not since the war. But the rhythm came back easily, almost too easily. The girl's counting slowed, and her voice softened as she watched her mother sleep more peacefully than before. Jonas looked around the room. Rusted corners, the faint hum of the algae vents, the cracked flooring. Life here was stripped down to survival. He thought of the dozens of times he'd sworn off getting involved, the promises he'd made to stay detached. And here he was again. He glanced at Neve, who had finally stopped counting, her small head resting against the tide mat. Her fingers still clutched the 5-credit note. Jonas sighed, folded his jacket beneath her as a pillow, and sat beside them through the night. Outside, the fog thickened against the glass, blue light pulsing faintly from the ocean below. Inside, 3 quiet breaths filled the room, the sound of people still alive. And for the first time in years, Jonas didn't feel like a man running from anything. The first light of Thalassa Crown came through the membrane window as a faint, colorless glow. The air in the small room was warmer now, thick with steam residue and the salt smell of the previous night. Jonas sat with his back against the wall, half awake, listening to the rhythm of two soft breaths. One steady, one still uneven but improving. Neve was asleep on the floor, curled up under his jacket. The 5-credit note she had clutched all night was now folded neatly beside her hand, like a promise no one needed anymore. Jonas's neck ached. His muscles protested the cold floor. He checked the time on his wrist console. 6:13. He leaned forward and checked Illyra's pulse again. Slower. Regular. The fever had broken sometime before dawn. She was still asleep, her face damp, her long white hair spread over the pillow. The shimmer of her blue skin had returned, faint but real. He reached for his kit and checked the makeshift nebulizer, still half full. He'd have to sterilize it later. He rubbed his face with both hands, exhaustion heavy in his chest. He hadn't planned to stay the night, but walking away had never really been an option. The city outside was waking up. Through the wall vents came the low hum of turbines powering the desalination lines. Somewhere above, the faint clang of lift doors echoed through the corridors. The blue vault never truly slept, just slowed its pulse. Jonas stood and moved quietly toward the small food unit in the corner. It was the kind used by maintenance crews, cheap and basic. He opened the dispenser and found a single pack of dried algae bread, a handful of Draxon mushroom chips, and a canister of desal water. He frowned. No protein. He tore the algae bread into small pieces, softened them with water, and set the cup beside the heater coil. The smell wasn't pleasant, earthy and bitter, but it was food. Behind him, a quiet voice said, "You don't have to." He turned. Illyra was awake, sitting up slowly. Her hair fell over one shoulder, and her eyes, pale cyan, ringed in silver, were fixed on him. Her voice was weak, but no longer cracked. "You need food," Jonas said simply. She looked around the room, confused for a moment. "You stayed?" "I did." Her brow furrowed. "You're not from the upper tiers, are you?" "No." "Maintenance section. Algae systems." She studied him for a long second, as if measuring how much of that was truth. "You used to be something else." He met her gaze. "Medic. Long time ago." She nodded once, slowly. "You have the hands for it." The silence that followed wasn't tense. It was careful, the kind that exists between people who haven't yet decided what they owe each other. Neve stirred and sat up, rubbing her eyes. Her hair was a mess of white tangles. When she saw her mother awake, she gasped, half laughing, half crying. "Mom, you're sitting up." Illyra smiled faintly and opened her arms. "Come here." Neve rushed over and clung to her, pressing her face into her mother's shoulder. Jonas looked away, giving them space. After a moment, Illyra said quietly, "She shouldn't have been out there alone." Jonas didn't answer right away. He poured the softened bread into a shallow bowl and handed it to Neve. "Eat slowly," he said. "Your stomach's empty." Then to Illyra, she came to the clinic. Tried to buy medicine. Illyra's expression darkened with a mix of shame and anger. "They refuse her?" "They wanted a signature," Jonas said. "A father's name." She looked at the floor. "There isn't one." Jonas didn't push. "You're not contagious. It's just salt veil buildup. You need rest, fluids, and one more nebulizer cycle. After that, you'll recover." You make it sound simple. It is when someone actually cares to treat it. That line hung in the air longer than he intended. Neve broke the silence with her small, practical voice. "Mom, he fixed the air too. The vent isn't loud anymore." Illyra turned her head, surprised. The soft hum near the ceiling had changed. The clogged filter Jonas had cleaned earlier now breathed smoothly. Jonas shrugged. It was full of salt dust. Would have made things worse. For the first time, Illyra smiled fully. It wasn't gratitude, it was acknowledgement. You fix things you don't have to. Force of habit. He checked his watch again. "I need to head out soon. Maintenance patrol starts at 8. But I'll come back tonight with more saline and proper filters." "You've done enough?" Illyra said. "Not yet." He paused, then added, "You'll relapse if the air stays dry." She studied him again, her eyes sharper now. "Why are you really here?" Jonas hesitated. The real answer wasn't something he said aloud anymore, because he'd seen too many die from simple things. because he couldn't stand walking past another body fading for no reason. He said, "Because your daughter asked." That made her quiet again. Neve looked up from her food. "Can we keep him until you're better?" "Neve," Illyra warned, but Jonas raised a hand. "It's fine." He smiled faintly. "You can borrow me for a bit." Neve grinned, the kind of grin that only children in hard places could manage. Half joy, half disbelief. "Then you have to eat with us." Jonas nodded, settling on the floor across from them. The three of them ate in silence for a while, the air warmer now, the fog outside thinning into daylight. When they finished, Jonas rinsed the cups in the sink. Illyra leaned back, eyes half closed, still fragile but calmer. "Where do you go after this?" she asked. He wiped his hands on a cloth. "Back to work. Lower turbine bay. Water pressure regulation. And then I'll check on you again." She watched him closely, as if testing whether he meant it. Her voice softened. "You shouldn't get involved. People here notice." "I'm not good at pretending not to notice," he said. For a second, she looked like she might argue. Then she sighed, as if the strength it would take wasn't worth it. Neve stood and tugged on Jonas's sleeve again, the same motion that had started all this. "Before you go, can you fix the light? It blinks too much when moms try and sleep." Jonas looked up. The fixture near the ceiling pulsed faintly, flickering between blue and white. He smiled. "Yeah, that I can fix." He climbed onto the chair, adjusted the connector, and pressed the reset. The light steadied, washing the room in a soft glow. Illyra's voice came from behind him, quiet, almost reluctant. "Thank you, Jonas." He turned, meeting her eyes. "Rest today. No talking too much. And drink." She nodded once. "If I do all that, will you come back?" He hesitated, caught off guard by how plainly she asked it. "Yeah," he said finally. "I will." When he left, the corridor outside felt colder than before. The blue vault was waking fully now, vendors opening their carts, pipes hissing with fresh desal flow, voices echoing in the distance. Jonas adjusted his collar against the damp air and headed toward the lift. He checked his wrist console again, out of habit. Work notifications scrolled past, but his eyes didn't track them. He was thinking about the girl's small voice, the way she said just one day. It should have stayed that way. A single night, a simple favor. But as he reached the lift and the doors slid open, he knew he wasn't done with them. Not yet. Behind him, in that small capsule room, the steam had cleared. Illyra slept again, her breathing deep and steady. Neve sat beside her, holding her mother's hand and whispering, "He'll come back. I know he will." Jonas didn't hear it, but somehow he felt it, and he didn't doubt it either. Jonas returned that evening with a small bag slung over his shoulder. The blue vault's lower corridors were louder now, vendors shouting, water pumps hissing, the metallic hum of the desalination towers rolling through the air. He hadn't meant to come back so soon, but the shift dragged, and his focus was shot. Every time the data monitor blinked, he saw a little girl holding up a 5-credit note. The corridor outside, their capsule, smelled faintly of brine and hot air. A few neighbors leaned against door frames, watching him with that quiet curiosity people in crowded places develop. Half suspicion, half boredom. A human walking into an alien residential block wasn't common. He ignored the stairs and pressed the door panel. The door slid open and warm, humid air drifted out. Inside, Neve was sitting cross-legged on the floor, scribbling shapes on a cracked tablet screen. She looked up, her face lighting up immediately. "You came back." Jonas smiled. "Told you I would." Illyra sat near the vent, wrapped in a dry teal shawl. She still looked fragile, but her skin tone had deepened, the pale gray undertone replaced by a faint, healthy shimmer. The light above her was steady now. He'd fixed that yesterday. "You didn't have to bring anything," she said, noticing the bag. "I brought filters," he replied, setting it down. "And saline. The ones here were expired." She hesitated, then said quietly, "No one comes back after the first night. Not in this place." Jonas unpacked the filters, not looking up. "Then maybe someone should start." He crouched beside the vent, replacing the old filters with new ones. The faint hiss of the air changed pitch, cleaner, smoother. Illyra's expression softened, but she said nothing more. Neve, curious as always, leaned closer. What does the new one do? It traps salt, dust, and microspores. Keeps your mom's lungs clear. Then we'll keep it clean, she said firmly. Jonas smiled, the corner of his mouth twitching. That's a good rule. He set up the nebulizer again, adding a small drop of azraphilin. One more treatment, he said. It'll finish what we started. Illyra nodded, pulling her shawl tighter. You really were a medic. I was, he admitted. Long time ago. What made you stop? He paused, checking the nebulizer's flow. Too many didn't make it. Her eyes flickered, understanding something beneath the words. And now I fix pipes instead of people. Pipes don't die. The silence after that was long. Only the sound of steam filled the room. When the treatment was done, Illyra leaned back, exhausted but calm. Her breathing sounded clear, the dry crackle gone. Neve clapped softly. She sounds better. Jonas gave her a small nod. She's doing great. The girl grinned, then tilted her head. Can we eat now? I found real meat. Jonas blinked, caught off guard. Real meat. Neve proudly opened a small insulated box near the wall. Inside were 2 thin slabs of reef pod meat wrapped in paper. A man from the upper docks dropped them. I traded my toy tablet for it. Jonas frowned. That's not a fair trade. It is if Mom eats it, she said simply. He looked at Illyra, who smiled faintly. She's stubborn. It's a family trait. He exhaled and gave in. All right, let's cook it properly then. He washed the meat in clean desal water, sliced it into thin strips, and placed it on a hot plate. The smell filled the small room, salty, rich, almost sweet. He stirred in some Draxin mushrooms from the cabinet and poured a trickle of kelp oil from his kit. The sizzling sound was warm, alive. Neve leaned forward, eyes wide. That smells amazing. Jonas smiled as he worked. It's called reef pod stir fry. My unit used to eat this when we got lucky with supply drops. Were you in the war? Neve asked suddenly. The question froze the room for a moment. Illyra's gaze shifted toward him, cautious but curious. Jonas didn't look up from the pan. Yes. Did you win? He stirred the food slowly. We stopped losing. That's all. Neve went quiet, sensing she'd reached the edge of something she didn't understand. Illyra changed the subject gently. What brought you here to Thalassa? Jonas handed her a cup of warm Orvan water before answering. After the war, I worked on the desal projects. They needed people who could fix both machinery and bodies. I stayed when everyone else left. Why? He thought for a second. Because I got tired of leaving. Her eyes met his for a long moment. Steady, unreadable. Then she looked away, fingers tracing the rim of her cup. When the food was ready, Jonas divided it into 3 small bowls. The meat was tender, the mushrooms golden. They sat cross-legged on the floor, eating quietly. The heat from the meal filled the space like a small victory. Neve chewed happily. This is better than anything from the vending wall. That's because this one was cooked by hand, Jonas said. Illyra watched him as he ate, her gaze steady but softer now. You're not like the others here. Humans in Thalassa don't stay in the lower sectors. I don't like the upper ones, he said simply. Too bright, too clean. Feels empty. She tilted her head, studying him. You sound like someone who's looking for something. He met her eyes briefly. Maybe I already found it. She didn't reply, but the faint color that rose in her cheeks said enough. Neve interrupted, holding up her empty bowl. Can I have more? Jonas chuckled. You finish faster than a dock worker. That's because it's good, she said, beaming. He refilled her bowl, then leaned back against the wall, tired but content. As the night deepened, the city's lights outside flickered across the translucent window. Jonas glanced at Illyra again. She looked stronger now, her breathing slow, natural. The shimmer of her blue skin reflected the soft glow of the overhead lamp. He noticed the way she wrapped the shawl around herself, not to hide but to stay warm. Her fingers moved with deliberate grace, an echo of a life that once had elegance before survival took over. He thought about asking if she had family elsewhere, but stopped himself. The question felt intrusive. Instead, he said quietly, Tomorrow, I'll bring you a proper air monitor. If the pressure stays low, the spores can't form again. She looked at him like she wanted to say something more, but only nodded. Thank you. Neve yawned loudly, her head nodding. Jonas took the empty bowls and stacked them on the counter. When he turned, the girl had already fallen asleep, curled beside her mother. Illyra whispered, "You don't have to come back again." Jonas's voice was low. "You want me not to?" She hesitated. "I don't know." "Then I'll take that as a maybe." A small smile touched her lips. "You're stubborn too." He stood, checking his watch. "It's late. Rest tonight. If you feel dizzy or short of breath, start the humidifier again. I'll leave the coil warm." As he reached for the door, Illyra's voice stopped him. "Jonas." He turned. Her eyes were calm, clear. "You said you stayed here because you were tired of leaving. Don't let this place turn you into someone who forgets why." He nodded slowly. "I won't." The door slid open, spilling in the blue glow of the corridor lights. He stepped out, letting it close behind him. For a long moment, Illyra sat in the dim room, listening to the quiet hum of the new filter. Neve mumbled in her sleep and shifted closer. Illyra looked toward the vent where the steam still rose in faint wisps and whispered under her breath, barely audible, "He's not like the others." Outside, Jonas walked through the fog-laced corridors, the taste of salt and steel in the air. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a stranger in the city. He didn't know it yet, but that night marked the beginning of something he hadn't expected, something that felt dangerously close to belonging. Morning came without sunlight, only the soft, blue glow of the ocean pulsing beneath the glass walks. The air was heavy and warm, and the sound of turbines running through the desalination towers made the walls vibrate faintly. Inside the small capsule room, Illyra was awake before Neve. She sat near the window, brushing her long white hair with slow, deliberate strokes. The color had returned to her face, and the faint shimmer of her blue skin caught the filtered light. Her breathing was calm now. Jonas had arrived early. He stood by the vent, installing a new airflow monitor, a compact gray unit that ticked softly as it calibrated. He looked tired, like someone who hadn't really slept. "You work too much," Illyra said quietly without turning. "I'm used to early mornings. You were in the war. It shows." He gave a small smile. "You can tell that from how I install a filter? From how you look at walls like they're maps," she said. "You still measure distance, even when you're standing still." Jonas didn't answer right away. He checked the monitor readings, then turned to her. "Habit," he said finally. Neve stirred on the floor, yawning. She blinked, rubbed her eyes, and stretched. "You're back again," she mumbled sleepily. Jonas looked at her and nodded. "Told you I would be." She smiled, still half asleep, then noticed the small gray monitor. "What's that?" "It keeps track of air quality," Jonas said. "If it turns orange, you tell me." "Like a breathing alarm?" "Exactly." Neve nodded seriously. "Then I'll watch it all day." Jonas smiled faintly. "You're a better assistant than most of the people I work with." As Neve went to wash her face, Illyra moved to the small heater and began to prepare something. She had found a bag of Zyron grain flakes and some leftover root vegetables. She poured water into the small pot, stirring slowly. Jonas noticed her movements. "You should still be resting." "I can stand now," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "And this isn't work. It's breakfast." He moved beside her and checked the pot. "Zyron porridge? You've eaten it before?" "Once," he said. "Long ago, in the field camps near the outer stations. We traded for it." Her expression softened slightly. "It's all we could afford, but it keeps well in the humidity." Jonas nodded. "Then it's perfect." He reached for a second pot and added a small pack of tied meat strips he had brought from the upper docks. The smell filled the small room, smoky and rich. Neve's eyes lit up when she saw it. "You brought meat again." Jonas grinned. "Thought you'd be hungry." "I'm always hungry," Neve said proudly. They ate together on the floor. The combination of warm porridge and seasoned meat filled the room with comfort. Illyra ate slowly, carefully, her fingers brushing the edge of the bowl as if she couldn't quite believe the warmth in it was real. After breakfast, Jonas checked the humidity levels on the monitor. "Your lungs are clear. You'll need mild breathing exercises for a week, but you're recovering fast." Illyra looked down at her hands. "You could have left after the first day. Why do you keep coming back?" Jonas hesitated. He didn't want to sound sentimental. Because you're not just a patient. Her eyes lifted. Then what am I? He looked at her, searching for the right word. Someone I didn't want to lose. She froze, eyes flicking to his face, unsure if she'd heard right. For a moment, neither spoke. The faint hum of the monitor was the only sound. Neve broke the silence by holding up her drawing pad. I made something. They both turned. The screen showed a rough sketch. 3 stick figures holding hands under a wavy line labeled "Said." "That's us," she said proudly. "You, me, and Mom." Jonas blinked, caught off guard. "You drew me taller than I am." "Because you fix things," Neve said simply. "Fixers are tall." Illyra smiled, the first real, relaxed smile he'd seen from her. "You have an artist's logic," she told her daughter. Neve giggled. "I'll make another one when you're not sick." Then she jumped up and ran to the door. "Can I go watch the fish tunnels?" Illyra hesitated. "Stay close to the corridor." "I will." Neve disappeared down the hallway, her small footsteps echoing. The room grew quieter again. Jonas leaned against the wall, watching Illyra as she adjusted her shawl. The fabric caught the blue light, outlining her shoulders. She spoke first. "You shouldn't get attached. This city doesn't keep people. It swallows them." He looked at her. "You think I don't know that? Then why risk staying near us? They'll ask questions. Humans don't spend time in alien blocks without reason." "I'm not hiding," Jonas said calmly. "And I don't care what they think." Her tone softened. "You should." Jonas stepped closer, his voice quiet but steady. "You were sick and alone. Your daughter was desperate. You needed help. That's all that matters." She held his gaze, her expression unreadable. "You speak like someone who still believes in rules that no longer exist." He gave a short, tired laugh. "Maybe. Or maybe I just believe in breathing without debt." Something in that made her expression shift, less guarded now, more human. She looked down, brushing her fingers along the edge of the bowl. "You're strange for a human." "Good strange?" he asked. "I haven't decided yet." He chuckled quietly, then reached for his coat. "You'll have time." Before he could leave, a soft alarm tone buzzed from the new air monitor. The display light flickered orange. Jonas immediately crossed the room, checking the reading. "Humidity drop," he said. "That shouldn't happen so soon." Illyra stood quickly, her expression tense. "What does that mean?" "It means the main desal line in this sector is cycling wrong. Probably a valve fault." He pressed his console, pulling up a schematic. "If the pressure stays low, it'll dry out the air again. Not dangerous yet, but uncomfortable." Illyra frowned. "Can it be fixed?" "I can fix it." She stepped closer. "You'll do it now?" He glanced at her. "If I wait, half this ring will wake up coughing again by morning." Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but she stopped herself. "Be careful down there. The desal tunnels are flooded half the time. I've seen worse." Before he left, she caught his sleeve. "Jonas, thank you." He paused, the warmth of her hand on his arm. "Just breathe, Illyra. I'll be back before the next meal." He stepped out into the corridor, the air cooler and thinner. He could already hear the distant clang of the desal line echoing down the metal spine of the vault. Inside the room, Illyra stood by the door for a long moment after it closed. The hum of the monitor returned to normal, its light flickering green again. She exhaled slowly, the sound steady and clear. Then she looked toward her daughter's drawing still glowing on the tablet screen. 3 figures under the sea, and smiled to herself, whispering, "Fixers are tall." Down in the maintenance corridors, Jonas followed the sound of rushing water through narrow tunnels lit by flickering blue strips. His boots splashed in shallow pools as he crouched beside a rusted valve. The air smelled like iron and salt. He checked his wrist console again and muttered, half to himself, "You keep running toward people, Rook. One day, you'll have to admit why." He turned the valve. The hiss of air changed pitch. Pressure stabilized. The sound of the city's lungs, its endless rhythm of circulation, returned to normal. He stood there for a moment, listening. The fog outside the vents rolled against the glass like breathing. When he finally headed back, the thought of that small drawing in the dim room stayed with him. 3 figures holding hands beneath a sea that never stopped moving. For the first time in years, Jonas didn't feel like a visitor in someone else's world. He felt like someone who had finally found a reason to stay. The following day arrived thick with humidity and a low fog that pressed against the dome's glass panels. Jonas walked back through the blue vault's lower corridors, a repair toolkit hanging from one shoulder. The air smelled of wet metal and the faint tang of algae bloom. He'd finished his morning shift early, citing pressure irregularities. Though the truth was simpler, he couldn't focus on anything else until he checked on Illyra and Neve. When he reached their capsule door, he stopped for a moment. The faint sound of laughter drifted through, a soft, high-pitched sound that belonged only to children. He pressed the access panel, and the door slid open. Neve was spinning slowly in place, her white hair brushing her cheeks as she hummed something tuneless but happy. Her bare feet tapped lightly on the cool floor. Illyra sat by the heater, folding clean fabric, probably freshly dried tide wraps. She looked up when Jonas entered, her expression shifting from surprise to quiet relief. "You fixed it," she said immediately. "The air, it feels different." He smiled faintly. The valve was half seized from salt corrosion. "I replaced it. Pressure's stable now." She nodded. "Then half the ring will owe you their sleep." Jonas set his bag down. "If they breathe easier, that's enough." Neve ran over, waving a small data card. "Look what Mom gave me. It has old movies from before the war, underwater explorers and fish cities and stuff. Sounds better than my work reports," Jonas said. "Want to watch one with us?" she asked eagerly. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Sure." They moved closer to the small wall projector. The display flickered, then stabilized, a faded recording of divers moving through shimmering green water. Their helmets reflected sunlight, their movements slow, almost dreamlike. The sound of bubbles filled the room. Neve sat cross-legged in front of the wall, eyes wide. Illyra leaned against the wall beside Jonas, her hands folded in her lap. "These were filmed near the surface," Jonas said quietly, "before the water turned too acidic for open dives." Illyra glanced at him. "You've seen the real ocean?" "Once," he said, "during transport duty. It was bigger than you can imagine, and quiet, like everything waiting to start again." Her gaze lingered on him for a moment. "You miss it." "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I'm better here." Neve pointed at the screen. "Do you think we could go up one day?" Above the glass, Illyra's voice softened. "We don't have permission to leave the vault, Neve." The girl frowned. "Then we'll ask Jonas. He fixes things." Jonas chuckled quietly. "That's a bit beyond my clearance." Neve sighed, pretending to think deeply. "Then maybe when Mom's lungs are strong." Illyra smiled at that, small but real. "When they're strong, we'll walk as far as the upper balconies." "That's a promise." Jonas noticed the way Illyra's hand tightened briefly over her shawl when she said it. There was a trace of longing there, something deeper than simple recovery. The movie ended, the room falling silent except for the hum of the vents. Neve curled against her mother's side, already half asleep. Jonas turned toward Illyra. "You're healing fast," he said. Her eyes stayed on the projection wall. "Because of you." He shook his head slightly. "Because your body wanted to fight." She turned her head, studying him. "You talk like someone who still believes in people. That's rare here." He met her gaze evenly. "I believe in what's right in front of me." "You." Her. Breathing. Something passed between them then, an unspoken understanding neither tried to name. Jonas rose quietly, checking the air monitor. "Green. Stable." He set a small sealed pack on the table. "Extra saline. Enough for a week." "You keep bringing things we can't pay for," Illyra said. "You already did," he replied. Her brow furrowed. "Ow!" "By being alive." She looked away, unsure what to do with that answer. Jonas knelt beside Neve, who was now fully asleep, her small hand clutching a folded blanket. "She's tougher than she looks," he said softly. "She's had to be," Illyra replied, voice low. "Her father died before she was born. He worked outside the arcology. The storm hit early." Jonas nodded, quietly processing that. "That explains her courage. She doesn't understand the risk I took coming here," Illyra continued. "I was supposed to register for housing, but I couldn't stand the way they looked at us. Like our worth was measured in air credits." Jonas looked at her steadily. "You did what you had to do." "Maybe." But every time she smiles, I wonder if I've already doomed her to this life. He sat back, resting his arms on his knees. I don't think survival is a mistake. Their eyes met again, steady, searching. The air between them thickened with something unspoken. After a moment, Jonas broke the silence. Do you need anything else? Yes, she said quietly. Company. He froze, caught off guard by the honesty in her tone. She stood, crossing the small space between them. Her voice dropped, almost a whisper. You've done more than anyone ever has for us. But you keep leaving before night. He looked at her, uncertain. I didn't want to overstep. You're not. Her words were steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she reached for his wrist. The warmth of her touch was real, grounding. He met her eyes. Are you sure? She nodded once. Stay until she wakes. Jonas exhaled slowly. All right. They sat together on the floor, the faint hum of the air system filling the silence. Outside, the fog rolled against the glass walks like low waves, the city lights bleeding through in soft blue and gold. After a while, Illyra spoke again. You don't talk much about the war. Not much to say, Jonas said quietly. It was chaos. I patched wounds until my hand stopped shaking. Then I left. Were you alone? Always. Her expression softened. Then you know what silence feels like. He glanced at her. I used to think I needed it. Now I'm not so sure. She leaned her head against the wall, her shawl slipping slightly off one shoulder. The motion was small, unintentional, but his gaze lingered for a heartbeat longer than he meant it to. You look tired, she said, voice low. I don't sleep well. Then stay here tonight, she said. It's not much, but the air's clean. He hesitated again, caught between logic and something else entirely. But the way she looked at him, steady, calm, open, made it feel less like a request and more like a quiet agreement between two people who had run out of reasons to be alone. He nodded once. Okay. She smiled faintly and leaned back, closing her eyes. Good. Jonas sat beside her as the city settled into its night rhythm. The sound of turbines blended with the muffled pulse of the sea below. Neve breathed softly in her sleep. He didn't move for a long time. He just sat there listening, 3 different rhythms, 3 different lives, but for the first time in years, they all felt like one. When Illyra's head finally slipped onto his shoulder, he didn't pull away. He adjusted slightly, letting her rest. Her breathing was steady, light, safe. For the first time since the war, Jonas didn't think about tomorrow. He didn't think about the things he'd lost or the ghosts he'd left behind. He only thought of the warmth of her skin against his arm, the faint smell of sea salt in her hair, and the small, impossible fact that in the middle of the coldest city on the ocean, he no longer felt alone. The air in the blue vault felt different that morning, lighter, quieter. The fog pressing against the glass walks outside had begun to thin, letting streaks of soft, white daylight filter through. Inside the capsule room, Jonas opened his eyes to the muted hum of the ventilation system and the steady sound of breathing beside him. Illyra was still asleep, her head resting against his shoulder, one arm draped loosely across her chest. Her hair, white as tide foam, spilled across the blanket and caught the pale light from the window. Neve was curled up on the other side of the room, half buried under the shawl Jonas had covered her with before he drifted off. For a moment, he didn't move. It had been years since he'd shared silence that felt peaceful, the kind that didn't demand words or explanations. He just sat there, letting himself exist in the small warmth of that space. When Illyra stirred, he lifted his hand slightly so she could adjust. She blinked up at him, confused at first, then remembering where she was. You stayed, she said, her voice still rough from sleep. I did, he replied. Her lips curved into a small, tired smile. I thought maybe I dreamed that. Jonas stretched his back and looked around the room. Still here. Still real. Neve yawned loudly, the kind of yawn that broke any tension in the room. She sat up, hair mess, eyes half open. Morning, Jonas said. You hungry? She nodded immediately. Always. Illyra chuckled quietly. You created a habit yesterday. He reached for his pack and took out a small sealed pouch. Dried reef fish. Not fancy, but we can make soup. Neve clapped her hands. Fish soup. As they prepared breakfast, Illyra moved slower than before, but with more confidence. She cleaned the small cooking bowl, rinsing it with desal water while Jonas crushed a few strips of dried fish into it. The scent that rose as it cooked was earthy and clean, like the docks on a calm day. Neve sat nearby, watching every movement. When you make food, the room smells safe, she said suddenly. Jonas looked at her, then smiled faintly. That's the goal. Illyra paused, spoon halfway to her mouth. She's right, she said softly. Before you came, this room always smelled like fear. He didn't know how to answer that, so he said nothing. He just watched the steam rise and handed her a bowl. They ate together quietly. After breakfast, Jonas helped Illyra stand and guided her toward the door. Walk with me, he said. Just a short distance. Good for the lungs. She hesitated, then nodded. The corridor outside was busy with early workers heading to the filtration plants. The air was still damp, the hum of machinery constant beneath their feet. As they walked slowly, Illyra leaned lightly on his arm, her balance still fragile, but her steps steady. Neve followed a few steps behind, hopping from one floor tile to another. Mom, you're walking faster than me now. Illyra smiled faintly, catching her breath. Not quite yet. They reached a small observation alcove overlooking the lower ocean. The water shimmered beneath the glass, glowing with pulses of green and blue. Jonas stopped and leaned against the railing. Breathe here. The air's cleaner by the windows. Illyra inhaled deeply, her chest rising slowly. For the first time, her lungs didn't crackle or strain. The sound was clear, open. This place is beautiful, she said. It is, Jonas agreed. You just stop noticing when you live in it long enough. She looked up at him. Then thank you for reminding me. Neve pressed her small hands against the glass. Can we really go up there one day? Above the water, Jonas looked down at her, choosing his words carefully. If we find the right clearance path, maybe. You mean a way that doesn't get us in trouble, she said smartly. He laughed. Exactly that. Illyra's tone shifted, quiet but serious. You'd really take us there? He met her eyes. If that's what you both wanted. She studied him for a moment, trying to find hesitation, but there was none. Why? Because you deserve to see something that isn't walls and filters. Her gaze held his for a long second before she looked back at the water. No one's ever said that to me before. Jonas leaned against the railing. Then I'm the first. They stood in silence, the faint hum of the dome surrounding them. It felt like the first real morning they'd all shared, the kind where nothing needed fixing, where time didn't rush. When they returned to the room, Neve went straight to her drawings, now spread across the floor. I made this one for you, she told Jonas, holding up a new picture. It showed the three of them again, but now the stick figures were standing under a bright circle-marked sky. Jonas crouched down, smiling. We've moved up in the world. That's because Mom's better now, Neve said proudly. Illyra's voice came from behind them, soft but clear. Better, yes, but only because you didn't give up. He looked back at her. You did most of the work. She shook her head. No, you stayed. That was the hard part. Jonas didn't answer, but the quiet between them said enough. As the day passed, Jonas helped them reorganize the small space. He adjusted the air filters, repaired a cracked panel near the heater, and tightened the water tap valve that had been leaking for weeks. Illyra sat nearby, folding fabric and occasionally glancing at him, curious, thoughtful. When evening came, the city lights outside shifted from blue to amber, reflecting off the water below. Jonas sat down, rolling up his sleeves, wiping sweat from his forehead. You work even when there's no need, Illyra said from the doorway. It's easier than thinking, he admitted. She tilted her head. What is it you don't want to think about? He hesitated. The things I left undone. The ones I couldn't save. You can't fix everyone. I know, he said quietly, but I keep trying anyway. She stepped closer, her shawl brushing his arm as she passed. Then maybe this time, you fix yourself too. The sentence hit him harder than she could have known. He looked at her for a moment, unsure how to reply. She didn't wait for an answer. She walked to the heater, refilling the kettle with desal water. Later, Neve fell asleep early, worn out from excitement. Jonas sat near the window, while Illyra folded the last of the blankets. The quiet between them wasn't uncomfortable. It felt steady, familiar. She spoke without turning. When you look at her, you smile like someone remembering something they lost. Jonas's voice was low. Maybe I remember what I should have had. She looked over her shoulder, eyes soft but firm. Then stop remembering. Start living. He didn't expect the words to strike as deep as they did. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Illyra crossed the small distance and sat beside him. Her voice dropped. I don't want this to be temporary, Jonas. Not just treatment, not just kindness. I don't know what it means yet, but I know I don't want it to end. He turned to her, searching her face for hesitation, but found none. Then we make sure it doesn't, he said. She smiled faintly, tired but genuine. You sound like someone who's done making promises to no one. Maybe because I've finally got someone to keep them with. Outside, the fog rolled past the glass walks, glowing with the pale shimmer of the sea below. Inside, the air smelled of salt, heat, and something new, something almost like peace. Illyra leaned her head against his shoulder again, her voice barely above a whisper. Then don't go tomorrow. Just stay. Jonas looked at her, at Neve asleep nearby, and at the calm rhythm of the monitor's green pulse. He placed his hand gently over hers. I think I already have. The hum of Thalassa Crown filled the silence that followed, soft, steady, alive. For the first time in years, Jonas didn't feel like a visitor or a medic or a man running from old ghosts. He felt like part of something that finally breathed back. The night in Thalassa Crown came quiet and slow. The city lights shimmered like a living reef through the fog. Pale blues, faint golds, the steady rhythm of machines beneath. Inside the capsule home, the air was warm, steady, alive with the low hum of the filter Jonas had repaired. He sat by the window, half in shadow, watching the sea through the glass. Illyra slept near him, her breathing calm, her body wrapped in the silver-threaded teal shawl. Neve was sprawled sideways under a pile of blankets, her small hand clutching one of Jonas's work gloves like a toy. Jonas didn't sleep much that night. His thoughts circled quietly. What tomorrow might bring, what would happen when someone from the registry realized a human was living in an alien residential ring. But every time he looked at the small rise and fall of Illyra's chest, the worry thinned a little. The sound of her steady breathing felt like a reminder. She was alive because he stayed. When dawn came, he slipped out of bed, poured water into the kettle, and set it on the heater coil. The smell of warm desal water filled the air, a smell he'd grown to like. Illyra stirred, her eyes opening slowly. You're up early again, she murmured. Force of habit. She sat up, pushing her hair back. You always start the day like this? He smiled faintly, usually alone. This is an upgrade. Her lips curve in a small, tired grin. You don't look like someone who was meant to be alone. Jonas glanced at her, then back at the heater. You'd be surprised how easy it is to get used to silence. Neve woke next, blinking sleepily, her hair a tangle of white strands. Is there breakfast? Jonas chuckled. You asked that before you even opened both eyes. That's because you always make something, she said, stretching her arms. And it always smells better than the vending wall food. He turned toward Illyra. I'll teach her how to make real soup next. She'll burn the room before she boils water, Illyra said, teasing. I will not. Neve protested, half laughing. The small room filled with light conversation, easy and natural. For a few minutes, it didn't feel like a struggling world or a forgotten district. It felt like a home. After breakfast, Jonas left for his maintenance shift, promising to return before evening. Illyra watched him go, standing in the doorway until the corridor lights swallowed him. The air felt colder after he left. The hours passed quietly. Illyra folded laundry, cleaned the vent filters, and practiced breathing drills the way Jonas had shown her. Slow inhalations, steady exhales. She started to feel stronger, but something deeper had changed too. When she moved, it was no longer with caution, but with quiet certainty, like she had started believing she belonged in her own skin again. By the time Jonas returned, the fog outside had thickened again, blurring the lights of the outer domes. He walked in, shoulders damp, hair sticking to his forehead. Illyra handed him a towel. You look like you wrestled with the desal towers. Close enough, he said, wiping his face. A valve burst in Sector 8. We spent half the day knee-deep in salt water. She smiled faintly. And yet you still came back. He looked at her, expression soft. Told you I would. Neve ran to him, waving a folded sheet of plastic paper. I made another drawing. Look, he crouched down to see. The sketch was more detailed this time. 3 figures again, but now the background showed waves, stars, and a moon. Us again? Jonas asked. Yes, Neve said proudly. But this time, it's the future. We're walking by the water, and no one's sick, and nobody says we don't belong there. Jonas's throat tightened slightly. He smiled anyway. That's a good future, Neve. Illyra came closer, glancing down at the drawing. You even remember the teal shawl, she said softly. Of course. It's lucky, Neve said. It means we're safe. Jonas reached out and gently patted the girl's head. Then I'll make sure it stays that way. Later, after Neve had fallen asleep, Jonas and Illyra stood on the small balcony outside the capsule. The air smelled of salt and metal. The surface of the sea far below pulsing with faint bioluminescent light. The sound of distant turbines filled the silence between them. She adores you, Illyra said quietly. Jonas leaned on the railing. She just likes stories. I used to tell her how machines breathe. She listens like it's magic. Illyra smiled faintly. It's not just stories. You gave her something to hope for. He turned his head slightly, studying her face. And what about you? She didn't look away. You made me remember how it feels to be seen. Jonas exhaled slowly. I wasn't trying to change anything. You didn't have to try. Her voice softened, almost a whisper. It just happened. The fog thickened, curling around them like soft smoke. He reached out, hesitating for only a moment before brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. Her eyes lifted, steady on his. Illyra, he started, but she shook her head gently. Don't explain. Just stay. He didn't. He stepped closer, his hand still resting against her cheek. The air between them felt charged, alive, like the quiet right before rain. She leaned into him, her breath steady, her voice low. Do you ever miss the life before all this? Jonas looked past her at the glowing water far below. Every day, but not right now. The words hung there for a long moment before she reached up and touched his hand where it rested on her cheek. Her skin was warm against his palm, her fingers trembling slightly. Inside, the faint hum of the filters pulsed like a heartbeat. They stayed like that, motionless, as the sound of the city faded into background noise. The connection between them didn't need words. It had already been built in the quiet moments, in shared meals and long silences, in the way she no longer looked at him like a stranger, but like someone she'd finally chosen to trust. When they finally moved, it was gentle, natural. He pressed his forehead lightly against hers, the warmth of her breath brushing his lips. Jonas, she whispered. Yeah. Don't leave again. Not even to fix things. Let someone else fix them. He smiled slightly, his voice rough. You think I can stop? Yes, she said, because now you have something to stay for. He didn't argue. He just stood there, holding her, while the fog outside pulsed with the slow light of the sea. By the time they went inside, the city had gone quiet. Neve was asleep, her small hand resting over her newest drawing. Illyra adjusted the blankets around her daughter and turned off the light. Jonas sat beside them, watching as the air monitor blinked a soft, even green. He felt Illyra's hand brush against his arm. Light, wordless. For the first time since he arrived on Thalassa Crown, he didn't think about leaving in the morning. He didn't think about the noise, the loneliness, or the ghosts of the war. He just breathed, slow, deep even. And as Illyra leaned quietly against him, her voice barely audible, she said the one thing neither of them had dared to before. You're home now, Jonas. He looked at her, then at the sleeping girl beside them, and the faint shimmer of blue light washing over the walls. I know, he said. Outside, the turbines kept their endless rhythm, steady as a heartbeat. Inside, 3 lives, once broken, once afraid, breathed together in perfect human quiet. The ocean below moved on, but for them, The world had already stopped long enough to begin again. The next morning, soft daylight filtered through the fog, filling the room with a clean, pale glow. The city's hum outside was distant, muted, like the world had chosen to move slower for their sake. Jonas woke first. He stayed still for a moment, feeling Illyra's hand resting lightly on his chest. Neve was curled up near the heater, holding her drawings as she slept. The air smelled faintly of salt and warm fabric, a scent that had become something like home. Jonas sat up carefully, not wanting to wake them. His body felt heavy but calm, a quiet kind of tiredness that didn't ache. He crossed the small room and poured water into the kettle. When the first bubbles formed, Illyra stirred, her eyes half open, voice soft. "Already working?" He turned, smiling faintly. "Just boiling water. I figured I'd let you sleep." "I'm done sleeping," she said, sitting up slowly. "I've had enough of lying still." She stretched her arms, the teal shawl slipping slightly from her shoulder, catching the pale morning light. She looked stronger, no trace of fever, no rasp in her voice. Only calm breath and a quiet determination in her eyes. "You look better than yesterday," Jonas said. "I feel human again," she replied with a small laugh. "Or whatever I am to you." He met her gaze. "You're exactly what you should be." Neve mumbled something in her sleep, turning over. Her voice was small, dreamy. "Don't leave, Jonas." Illyra smiled softly. "Even in her dreams, she's worried you'll go." Jonas looked at the little girl, then back at Illyra. "She doesn't have to worry anymore." He poured 3 cups, Ferlin seed coffee for himself, warm cement tea for Illyra, and Larn fruit nectar for Neve. The smell filled the air, simple and comforting. When Neve woke, she rubbed her eyes, sniffed, and immediately smiled. "Coffee means Jonas is still here," she said. "Good guess," Jonas replied, handing her the cup. After breakfast, they opened the capsule door to let fresh air flow through. The corridor was quiet. Somewhere above, the distant hum of the upper sectors echoed like a reminder of a world they'd all stopped caring about. Jonas leaned against the doorway, watching the mist curl along the glass walk. The pressures holding steady, airflows balanced. Illyra looked at him knowingly. "That means you're out of excuses to come by for repairs." He chuckled. "Guess I'll have to come for dinner instead." Her smile deepened, slow and genuine. "Dinner, then. Something more than soup." "Meet again." Neve piped up eagerly. "Maybe," Jonas said, "if we can find any worth cooking." Illyra's voice softened. "I'll cook next time. You've done enough." "Never thought I'd hear you say that." She folded her arms, pretending to be stern. "Don't get used to it." The day passed quietly. Jonas helped reinforce the vent system and recalibrate the heater coil while Neve sat nearby, coloring her newest drawing, a large dome above glowing blue water. She labeled it in crooked letters, "Home." As evening approached, they climbed to the upper walkway above the residential ring. It wasn't officially open to residents, but Jonas had the clearance code from his work terminal. The platform overlooked the vast ocean below. The water shimmered with soft light and faint specks of movement, gold drones gliding between towers, cut through the mist. Neve pressed her hands against the railing, awestruck. "It's so big," she whispered. Jonas crouched beside her. "This is what it looks like when the ocean breathes." Illyra joined them, her hair moving lightly in the vent breeze. The sight took her breath for a moment. The endless water, the faint sound of turbines deep below, the way light shimmered through fog like dawn that never fully arrived. She turned toward Jonas. "You really did bring us above the water. You said you wanted to see it. And you remembered. I always remember promises." Neve grinned. "Does that mean you're staying forever?" Jonas hesitated for only a second, then nodded. "Yeah, forever sounds right." The little girl laughed and leaned against him. Illyra watched them both, her expression softening until the wall she'd carried for so long finally slipped away. They stayed there until the fog turned gold with evening light. When the wind grew colder, Jonas led them back down the corridor. Inside, the air felt warmer than before, not just from the filters or the heater, but from something invisible and human. Later, while Neve slept, Jonas and Illyra sat side by side at the window. Below them, The sea flickered faintly with bioluminescent trails, tracing patterns through the deep water. "Before you came," Illyris said quietly, "I thought we were invisible, like the city had already decided we didn't matter." Jonas looked at her, his tone steady. "You were never invisible. People just stopped looking." She turned toward him, her eyes bright under the low light. "You didn't." He reached for her hand, fingers brushing hers. "No, I didn't." She exhaled, a small, trembling sound, not of fear but of release. "I think I forgot how to want things until you showed up." He squeezed her hand gently. "Then start small. Want something simple." "I already do," she said, leaning closer. "I want you to stay." Jonah smiled, real unguarded. "Then that's simple enough." She leaned forward, closing the last inch between them, her lips meeting his in a slow, certain kiss. There was no hesitation, no fear, only warmth and quiet relief, like the final exhale after a long-held breath. When they pulled apart, Illyra rested her forehead against his. "You really are impossible to forget." "Good," he murmured, "because I'm not going anywhere." Outside, the fog rolled gently against the glass, the light of the ocean glowing beneath them like a heartbeat. Inside, 3 lives, human, alien, and something between, had found their rhythm. Neve stirred in her sleep, mumbling, "Don't forget the pears for tomorrow." Illyra smiled through a quiet laugh. "She never stops planning." "Then we'll get them," Jonas said. "Honey-salted orange pears, just like she wants." He stood, checked the air monitor one last time, and watched the steady green light pulse softly across the wall. Everything was balanced. Air, warmth, breath, life. As they laid down for the night, Illyra curled against him, her voice faint but sure. "It's strange," she whispered. "For the first time, I'm not waiting for something to go wrong." Jonas brushed a hand through her hair, his voice low. "That's because nothing will. Not anymore." And in that quiet room, sealed against the cold, held by the hum of the living city, the world finally stopped moving fast enough for them to rest. Outside, the water shimmered beneath the dome's glow, endless and alive. Inside, Jonas, Illyra, and Neve slept close. 3 steady breaths joined into one rhythm, the kind that didn't need promises anymore. Only peace, only home.